Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources, peel back the layers, and really get to the heart of the knowledge within.
Glad to be diving in.
Today, we're looking at a book many consider, well, essential for a subject that often causes anxiety, let's say. Organic Chemistry as a Second Language. First Semester Topics, 4th edition by David Klein.
That's the one. A classic starting point.
And our mission isn't just to summarize. We want to unravel those absolutely crucial first steps, how to speak, read, and really understand the visual language of organic chemistry. We're focusing right in on Chapter 1, bond line drawings. You could say it's like learning the alphabet before you can read the words.
It really is. And what's great, I think, is how Klein frames it. Yeah, he presents organic chemistry less like a list of facts to memorize.
Which is what everyone fears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And more like a story unfolding, a coherent narrative.
Yeah.
And these drawings, they are the alphabet for reading that story.
So without mastering this, you're basically locked out.
Pretty much. The rest just won't make sense. So yeah, we're going to show you why this is so critical and, hopefully, how to start thinking like a chemist right from the beginning.
Okay, let's get into it then. The big question first. Is organic chemistry really as tough as its reputation? Is it just endless memorization?
Well, the book tackles that myth straight away. It argues pretty strongly that no, it's not about rote memorization. It's understanding this plot, as the author calls it.
A plot, like in a novel.
Yeah, exactly. He uses this great analogy, like watching a really good movie several times. You don't sit there with a notepad trying to memorize every line.
Right. No, of course not.
But after you've seen it a few times, you start to get why certain lines are said, how scenes connect, how the plot develops. You might even quote lines.
Because they make sense in context.
Precisely. Not because you drilled them, but because they fit the story. And the argument is, organic chemistry works the same way. It's one long, logical, connected story.
I like that. Focus on the logic, the why, not just the what. It's more like being a detective than memorizing a phone book.
That's a good way to put it.
So what is this plot then, specifically for the first semester? What's the story arc?
Well, the first half, generally, is all about building up to understanding reactions. That's the main event later on.
Okay, so we start small.
Yeah, you start with the absolute basics. Atoms, what are they? Then, how do they connect? That means bonds.
Atoms, then bonds.
Then, how those bonds affect the molecule's shape, its stability. You build up this picture. Then you learn how to actually draw these things, the bond line drawings we're focusing on, and how to name them.
The vocabulary.
Right, and even how they move and twist in 3D space. It's only after you've got all that foundational stuff
All those building blocks.
that you're really ready to understand how and why reactions happen. It's sequential. You can't skip steps.
That makes sense. So beyond just grasping the concepts, how should we actually study this stuff? What does the book recommend for learning this second language?
Klein stresses two main things. First, really understanding the principles, the why. And second, practicing solving problems.
Because that's what you're tested on.
Right.
Problem solving.
Exactly. Your grade depends on solving problems. So the question becomes, how do you get good at that?
Yeah.
And the key habit, according to the book, is learning to ask the right questions.
What kind of questions?
Like a doctor figuring out what's wrong or a lawyer building a case. They always start by asking questions. You need to look at a molecule or a problem and ask, okay, what's going on here? What are the key features? What principles apply?
So active questioning, not passive reading.
Absolutely. And that leads to the other big piece of advice. Consistent daily practice. You cannot learn this just by reading the textbook or your notes.
You have to actually do it.
You have to pick up a pencil, try the problems, fail, figure out why you failed, and try again. Book is very clear. You will get frustrated sometimes. That's okay. That's part of learning.
What about just reading the solutions manual? That seems tempting.
Oh, that's the worst trap. The book warns against it. Reading a solution makes you feel like you understand, but it doesn't build the problem-solving skill. It's super inefficient.
Okay, so the formula is...
Review the principles until they make sense in the context of the plot. Understand how they connect. Then spend pretty much all your remaining study time actually doing problems. Active engagement. That's the core message.
Active learning, asking questions, consistent practice. Got it.
Okay, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Chapter 1 then. These bond line drawings, they're everywhere in organic chemistry.
They really are. The standard way chemists communicate structures quickly. So first, how do you read them?
Okay.
The basic idea is the lines represent the carbon backbone, usually drawn in a zigzag.
Why zigzag?
It approximates the real bond angles, the tetrahedral geometry around single bonded carbons, makes it a bit more realistic than just a straight line. And here's the first key rule. Every corner and every endpoint of a line represents a carbon atom.
Ah, endpoints too, not just the bends. Right. That's a super common mistake for beginners, forgetting the carbons at the very ends of chains or branches.
So a simple line drawn on the page is actually 2 carbons.
Exactly. One at each end. A V shape is 3 carbons. You have to train your eye to see every point.
Okay. Corners and ends are carbons. What about double and triple bonds? How do they show up?
Pretty straightforward. Double bonds are shown with 2 parallel lines between carbons. Triple bonds with 3 parallel lines.
Makes sense.
But there's a really important detail for triple bonds. Because they have a linear geometry, the atoms are in a straight line. They're drawn straight, not zigzagged.
Oh, interesting. So if a triple bond is in the middle of a chain.
Those carbons involved in the triple bond and the atoms directly attached to them will be drawn in a straight line segment within the overall structure. You might see little gaps drawn sometimes just to make it clear where the triple bond starts and ends. But the key is linear geometry means a straight line in the drawing.
Got it. Zigzags for single double, straight line for triple. Now the tricky part. Hydrogens. They mostly disappear, right?
Okay. They do. That's the main simplification. And yeah, figuring out the invisible hydrogens is where you really start learning the language.
So how do we do it?
The rule is fundamental. An uncharged carbon atom always forms a total of 4 bonds. Always.
Okay, the magic number is 4.
Right. So you look at a carbon in the drawing, count how many bonds are explicitly shown connecting to it. Let's say you see 2 lines coming off it. Since it must have 4 bonds total, you just assume the other 2 missing bonds are connected to hydrogen atoms. If you see 3 bonds drawn, you assume 1 hydrogen. If you see 4 bonds drawn, there are no hydrogens attached to that carbon.
So it's just subtraction from 4.
Basically, yes. But crucially, this only applies to hydrogens on carbon.
Ah, okay. What about hydrogens on other atoms?
Hydrogens attached to anything other than carbon, like oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, whatever, must be drawn explicitly. You'll see OH, NH2, SH written out. You never assume those.
Okay, that's a key distinction. Assume H is on C to make 4 bonds, but always draw H's on ON, etc.
You got it. So reading a complex drawing involves going carbon by carbon, counting visible bonds, and mentally adding the hydrogens. A carbon at the end of a chain with 1 bond showing has 3 H's. A carbon in a ring with 2 bonds showing has 2 H's. It becomes second nature with practice.
Okay, that demystifies reading them quite a bit. Now, how about drawing them ourselves? How do we go from, say, a name or a full structure to a correct bond line drawing?
Good question. When drawing, your main focus is getting the carbon skeleton, right, the connectivity, and then remembering to draw any atom that isn't carbon, plus any hydrogens attached to those non-carbon atoms.
So draw the heteroatoms, as they're called?
Exactly. ONS halogens. Draw them, and any H's attached to them. For the carbon skeleton itself, remember the zigzag for straight chains. It represents the bond angles better.
Right.
And another tip. When you draw double bonds, try to arrange the single bonds coming off those double bonded carbons so they're as far apart as possible. Maximize the space. It just makes the drawing much clearer and avoids ambiguity.
Like, don't bunch things up.
Exactly. Good drawings are clear drawings. Oh, and don't worry about which direction you start the zigzag, up first or down first. It doesn't matter. As long as the connections are the same, it's the same molecule.
Okay. So focus on connectivity, draw non-carbons and their hydrogens, use zigzags, keep it clear. What are the big mistakes that don't ever do this thing?
Oh, the big no-nos. Number 1, absolutely critical. Never draw a carbon atom with more than 4 bonds.
The rule of 4 again.
It's fundamental.
Yeah.
Carbon is in the second row of the periodic table. It only has 4 valence orbitals, 1 bis, and 3 p's. It physically cannot form 5 bonds. If you draw 5 bonds to carbon, the drawing is chemically impossible. Full stop.
Got it. Max 4 bonds to carbon. What else?
Consistency. You have to choose your style. Either you draw every atom showing all the C's and all the H's explicitly like a Lewis structure or condensed structure, or you use the bond line convention where you don't explicitly show the carbons or the hydrogens attached to them.
Can't mix them.
No. You can't draw like the C symbols but leave out the H's in a bond line style. It's either all atoms shown or the bond line shorthand. Pick one and stick to it for that drawing.
Okay. No hybrids. all or nothing.
Pretty much. And the last point is maybe more about good practice than a strict rule, but it relates to clarity again. Try to draw your zigzags and rings so bonds are spread out. Avoid drawing angles that are too acute or bonds that look like they're overlapping. Maximize space.
Makes sense. Clear communication. Understanding these rules helps you see what's changing in a reaction, right? Turning formulas into actual pictures.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
It makes chemistry visual.
Okay, let's move to another crucial piece of this language. Formal charges. Why are these little pluses and minuses so important?
Oh, they're critical. Formal charges tell you where electrons are either in excess or deficient compared to a neutral atom. This is huge for predicting reactivity.
How so?
Well, areas of negative charge are often electron-rich and might act as attackers in reactions, while areas of positive charge are electron-poor and might be attacked. Understanding charges is essential for understanding reaction mechanisms and resonance later on. A formal charge is basically a flag saying, pay attention here, something unusual is happening with the electrons.
So if you miss a formal charge, you're missing a key piece of information.
Absolutely. Your drawing is incomplete and misleading. It's like leaving out punctuation that changes the meaning of a sentence.
How do we figure them out? Is there a calculation?
There is a formal calculation, but often you learn to recognize patterns. The calculation is, take the number of valence electrons the atom should have when it's neutral just from its group number on the periodic table.
Like 4 for carbon, 6 for oxygen, 5 for nitrogen.
Exactly. Then count the electrons the atom actually possesses in the drawing. The way you do that is count all of its lone pair electrons, plus 1 electron from each bond it's forming.
So you split the bonds conceptually.
Yeah, each bond counts as 1 electron for that atom in this calculation. Then you just subtract valence electrons expected, electrons actually counted in the drawing, formal charge.
Can we do a quick example? Say an oxygen with 1 bond and 3 lone pairs.
Sure. Oxygen is group 6A, so it expects 6 valence electrons. In your example, it has 1 bond, that's 1 electron for the oxygen, and 3 lone pairs, that's 3 by 2 equals 6 electrons. Total counted is 1 plus 6 equals 7 electrons.
Okay.
So the formal charge is 6 expected. 7 actually equals 1 of 1. That oxygen has a negative formal charge.
And a nitrogen with 4 bonds and no lone pairs.
Nitrogen's group 5A expects 5 valence electrons. With 4 bonds, it owns 1 electron from each, so 4 electrons total. No lone pairs. Formal charge. 5 expected, 4 actual plus 1 positive charge.
It becomes quick once you know the expected numbers.
Right, and you start to just recognize neutral oxygen usually has 2 bonds, 2 lone pairs. Negative oxygen, 1 bond, 3 lone pairs. Positive oxygen, 3 bonds, 1 lone pair. Similar patterns for nitrogen and carbon.
Speaking of carbon, you mentioned earlier it usually has 4 bonds. But what happens when it has a formal charge? Does that change?
It absolutely does. This is a key point and often trips people up. If a carbon atom has a formal charge, either positive or negative, you will only have 3 bonds, not 4.
Only 3. Why?
Okay, let's take positive carbon, C+. The positive charge means it has 1 fewer valence electron than the usual 4. So it only has 3 valence electrons available to make bonds. Therefore, it can only form 3 bonds.
So C plus always has 3 bonds and no lone pairs.
Correct. Now, negative carbon, C. The negative charge means it has 1 extra valence electron, giving it 5 total.
So it makes 5 bonds.
No. Remember, carbon cannot make 5 bonds because it only has 4 valence orbitals.
Right, the orbital limitation.
So what happens with those 5 valence electrons? 2 of them pair up to form a lone pair, which occupies 1 orbital. The other 3 electrons form 3 bonds using the other 3 orbitals. So a negatively charged carbon always has 3 bonds and 1 lone pair.
Okay, so both C plus and C have only 3 bonds, but C also has a lone pair.
Exactly. That's a crucial takeaway. Seeing a C plus or C tells you immediately it only has 3 attachments.
And if I see a drawing with, say, 5 bonds to a carbon or a C plus with 4 bonds.
Instant red flag. That drawing is chemically incorrect. It violates fundamental bonding rules.
Good check to keep in mind.
Okay,
Okay, final piece of the puzzle, lone pairs. You said C has one, and we talked about oxygen and nitrogen having them, but you also said they're often not drawn.
That's the common convention, yes. To save time and reduce clutter, formal charges are always shown. But lone pairs, especially on common atoms like O and N, are often omitted.
So how do we know they're there if we can't see them? It feels like we need X-ray vision.
Not quite X-ray vision, but it'd use the information you do have,
Yeah.
the formal charge and the number of bonds. It's like solving a little puzzle for each atom.
Okay, walk me through the logic.
First, same starting point.
Uh-huh.
How many valence electrons should the neutral atom have from the periodic table?
Got it. Group number.
Second, adjust that number based on the formal charge shown. If it's negative, add 1 electron. If it's positive, subtract 1 electron. This tells you the actual number of valence electrons that atom has in this specific charge state.
Okay. Expected, adjust for charge. Now I know the actual number of electrons.
Right. Third, count how many of those electrons are being used in the bonds that are drawn. Remember, each bond uses 1 electron belonging to that atom.
Okay.
The leftover electrons, the ones not used in bonding, must be the lone pair electrons. Since lone pairs always come in twos, you just divide the given number by 2 to find the number of lone pairs.
Let's try that positive oxygen example again. O plus 1 at.
Yeah.
3 bonds, 1 lone pair.
Okay. Oxygen expects 6 valence electrons. The +1 charge means it actually has 6 1 obviously sees 5 valence electrons in this state.
Right.
We see 3 bonds drawn to it. Each bond uses one of those 5 electrons. So 3 electrons are used in bonding.
Leaving.
Actual 3 used in bonds if 2 electrons left over.
And 2 electrons make.
1 lone pair.
Yeah.
Exactly. So even if the lone pair wasn't drawn, the plus charge and the 3 bonds tell you it must be there.
That's pretty neat. It's like the information is encoded.
It is. And again, you quickly learn the patterns. Neutral O, 2 bonds, 2 lone pairs.
Yeah.
Negative O, 1 bonds, 3 lone pairs. Positive O, 3 bonds, 1 lone pair.
And for nitrogen?
Neutral N 3 bonds, 1 lone pair. Negative NN, 2 bonds, 2 lone pairs. Positive N plus, 4 bonds, 0 lone pairs. Knowing these patterns lets you instantly see the lone pairs without calculating every time.
So connecting this back, mastering this skill, seeing the unseen lone pairs really makes you fluent, doesn't it?
It really does. Because understanding where the electrons are, especially the lone pairs and the charges, is fundamental to understanding electron flow and reactions.
Yeah.
That's what mechanisms are all about, following the electrons. If you can't see the lone pairs, you can't follow the story.
Wow. Okay, so we've really dug into the foundations here from organic chemistry as a second language. Bond line drawings are the alphabet and grammar. Understanding how to read them, how to draw them correctly, spotting formal charges, and inferring lone pairs. These are the absolute bedrock skills.
Couldn't agree more.
And it all comes back to that mindset. See it as a logical story, ask questions, and practice, practice, practice.
That's the path. It's not about memorizing isolated facts. It's about understanding the plot. And these drawings let you read that plot.
So a challenge for everyone listening: open your textbook, find any bond line drawing, and try it out. Count the carbons, figure out the hydrogens, find the formal charges, spot the lone pairs, see what story it tells you.
Great exercise. You might surprise yourself how much you can decode now.
Thank you so much for breaking that down for us. It makes the language seem much less intimidating.
My pleasure. Hopefully it helps us get started on the right foot.
And thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning, keep exploring that chemical story, and we'll see you next time.